my name is Luna and today we're going to be looking at some tips and tricks for using maps and minis in your D&D games. Whilst they aren't necessary for a fun and engaging game, maps and minis are a celebrated part of the history of Dungeons & Dragons, and they add a fun, tactile element to the table. Plus, they're a great excuse to just collect more nerdy stuff and play with toys as an adult. Maps and minis are most frequently used during combat to track the players and the enemy's movements, conditions, and also what's happening with the general environment. It's incredibly handy for seeing if you can hit that skeleton with your Eldritch Blast, or to help you remember that the fighter has some cover, or to really scare your players with just how big that dragon is. The first thing you need to know is that you don't need to spend a lot of money to get a good visual representation of the game. A piece of paper and some dice or some tokens will do the job really well. I know some Dungeon Masters who actually prefer to keep the map and the minis as simplistic as possible to keep most of the game in the imagination. And some Dungeon Masters will do away with maps and minis altogether, but that's a whole other topic for a whole other video. Whilst using dice or tokens as character markers might not feel as fancy as using custom minis, minis can be really expensive, and some Dungeon Masters have spent decades building up their collection, and it's not always feasible to go out and spend a lot of money on a bunch of minis all at once. So it's fine not to have minis for every character or creature. You might use a combination of minis and a combination of dice or tokens, and that's okay. I'm slowly building up my own personal collection of minis. I just buy one every so often and paint it when I get time, and so I have some painted minis and some unpainted ones on the board, and they still do exactly what I need them to. If you'd like to upgrade from a paper map, you can get a dry erase map just like this one here that I have. This one's double-sided. It's very well loved, and you can just go ahead and draw your map on that as you go. Or you can get interlocking dungeon tiles like these. These ones are the Warlock tiles from WizKids that click together to build up the map that you need. Or you can go all out and buy really fancy 3D terrain. Alas, I do not have any yet. One day. Something that I've been using a lot lately in my games is this big map book, which was very kindly sent to me from Yarrow Studios. And it's just a fold-out book that you can use all the different maps in there and pick whichever one would suit your encounter. It's also dry erase, so you can write on it and wipe it off. Very handy. Most maps for D&D will have a grid, and each square is 1 inch by 1 inch. A tiny creature will control 1/4 of a square. A small or a medium creature will control an entire square. A large creature controls 4 squares. A huge creature controls 9 squares. And a gargantuan creature, if you're ever unlucky enough to meet one, controls 16 squares or more. Each square represents 5 feet of movement, although some dungeon maps will have each square representing 10 feet. If a player has a movement speed of 25 feet, they can move 5 squares either vertically, horizontally, or diagonally. Now, in pure measurement terms, if you measure each square as being 5 feet, including diagonal, a character is going to be able to cover more distance than if they just moved vertically or horizontally, so it's not really an accurate indicator of how far they can travel. If you want to portray a slightly more realistic version, you can use this method from the Dungeon Master's Guide, which says that the first square of diagonal movement costs 5 feet, the second square costs 10 feet, the next one again 5 feet, and then 10 feet, 5, and so on. Personally, I find this a little bit cumbersome and kind of annoying to remember in the middle of a combat, so I like to just use a little paper ruler I made, which can show you very easily how far a player can move. You can also use a piece of string or a pipe cleaner or something like that. A lot of spells have an area of effect, which might be in a cone, a cube, or a column. So again, it's really easy just to cut out some little paper templates so that you can try and do a quick measurement of whether or not that fireball is going to hit a particular character. If your player characters or your bad guys are smart enough, they might have some cover. To determine if a creature has cover, you can take the corner of the square that the attacking creature is standing in and then trace a direct line to the target they're trying to attack. And if that line is obstructed in any way, then that creature has cover. Half cover adds a +2 to the creature's AC, 3/4 cover adds +5, and if a creature has total cover, they cannot be targeted except by some area of effect spells. In the same way, you can determine if a creature has line of sight on something they're trying to hit by taking the corner of the square that they're standing in and then tracing a direct line to whatever it is they're trying to hit. If that line is obstructed in any way, then they don't have line of sight, making it a little bit harder for them. Sometimes during combat, you can have a lot of things to keep track of, including the conditions of the characters and the creatures on the map. You're gonna try and remember if this person is stunned or this one is poisoned. A really quick and easy way to give yourself a visual reminder that that person has a status effect is to use the tops of lids from like soda bottles, and you can just kind of like pop that on the mini to remind you that something's going on there you need to remember. Another option is you can take a little token like this one and just place it underneath the mini just to again give you a little visual reminder. Sometimes using a map can give away a surprise to your players if you've got an area of your map that you don't want them to see right away until they, round a corner or something. So all you really need to do is just cover it up with like a piece of paper or some fabric or something, and then when you're ready, you can reveal it in a dramatic fashion. I would love to hear how you use maps and minis in your games. Please put your experiences in the comments below, as well as any tips and tricks you might have for beginners. I'd like to say thank you so much to my patrons and YouTube members, and a special welcome to new patrons, Ali and Clarice. If you'd like to support the channel and gain access to my podcast Flump Friends, the podcast in which I talk about all things D&D and tabletop RPGs, you can do so by following the link in the description or by pressing the big join button underneath this video. I'll see you next time. Bye! We gotta get Molly in the video. Come in, baby.